Vampire's Husband, Chapter 3, Part 2. Jack immediately felt that faint gliding along the invisible air currents, and when the clouds scattered around and remained far above, he was completely convinced that he ended up in the land of the Dark Ones. Below, as far as the eye could see, a huge, majestic forest stretched before him, and this forest, contrary to the world he knew, was not green, not brown, or even yellow, but dark purple. In addition, the tops of some trees twinkled brightly in the sun, and that gave this fantastic picture an even more unusual and frightening appearance. Soon they were racing just above surface, so that the tops of many trees were no more than 2 meters from the wheels of the carriage. Leaning out of the window up to his shoulders, Jack looked down, feeling a deep, irresistible excitement. At some point, something like a wide aerial path appeared in the thick of the forest, and the carriage rushed towards it, instantly plunging into the forest. It immediately darkened all around, and Jack saw an even more amazing, incredible view. There was a forest in front of him that could rightly be called unearthly. The trunks of the trees here were not brown or even greenish, but black as fresh resin, and all over the surface they were covered with thin silver veins that radiated a faint leaden glow. As for the foliage, it seemed to be strewn with amethyst dust, so bright and saturated was its unprecedented shade. At first, the forest seemed uninhabited, but soon Jack began to notice its mysterious and no less fabulous residents. The first creature he saw was a nard, a small, graceful animal that looked a bit like a deer, but it had green fur and oblong white spots along the sides. It stood by a huge tree and watched curiously the carriage flying near the ground until it disappeared from sight. Jack stared at him too as long as he could, and his ears were almost ringing at the same time. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, because in his world everyone considered nards fictional creatures, which even in Kmir had never existed. The wheels of the dark carriage eventually hit the surface of the forest path, and the unicorn's hooves hammered powerfully on the main masonry. Jack did not take his eyes off the window even for a second. Soon at the very curb, he noticed something comical and unforgettable. There was a whole group of huge hedgehogs with an emerald green needle shell. They were all moving somewhere together and waddling from side to side in such a funny way that, despite all his fatigue and anxiety, Jack could not help but smile. At the end, although he did not know yet that their journey was almost finished, he managed to catch a glimpse of a white wanderer in the forest. In the mortal world, people called tiny forest fairies white wanderers. They had an unusual ability that allowed them to truthfully answer any question of the one who caught them. Moreover, this question could be absolutely anything, up to life expectancy or even more unattainable information. In Silver Cauldron, no one believed in the existence of white wanderers. Just like nards, they were considered fictional fairy tale creatures, unthinkable even for almighty Kmir. However, Jack had no doubt that it was White Wanderer he had seen. She exactly matched the description that he had read as a child in an old book of fairy tales. She was presented there as a miniature flying creature, leaving behind a long trail of whitish-red glue. Nothing else could look the same. Jack knew it for sure and felt even more crushed because of this terrifying certainty. The woodland soon began to thin out and finally disappeared completely, revealing to Jack the purpose of his long journey. Diamante Castle was even bigger than he had imagined. It was a whole fortress city, solid, rich, and overcast, as well as the dark carriage in which he had spent an unknown amount of time. The pointed towers of the castle, rising almost to the very clouds, evoked a painful feeling of depression, and the huge fountain in front of the main entrance, which was a winding mountain statue, at first reminded Jack of a hidden monster that could rear up at any moment. When the carriage stopped and Niadorshem opened the passenger door, Jack felt extremely bad. His own body seemed strangely weakened. Everything swam before his eyes, and his breathing was labored, as if the air around him had suddenly ended. Nevertheless, he managed to get out of the carriage safely, and at the same time, as it seemed to him, without showing his weakness. The first thing his eyes involuntarily turned to upon leaving was the unicorns. Looking at them, he immediately received an answer to his recent question. The sharp horns on the unicorns, which until that moment he had considered their natural adornment, radiated a soft silvery glow which immediately revived another valuable memory in his mind. He realized that in front of him were not ordinary unicorns, although ordinary ones were also very rare in Kmir, but silver ihastras, the highest breed of unicorns with a special magic horn that allowed them to fly and also to carry to any distance those whom their owner wanted. Jack did not come closer because he was afraid to stagger along the way, but the fact itself made a strong impression on him and even made him feel some fear of the master of these rare creatures. Judging by his wealth, it was indeed a very powerful and influential member of the unearthly elite. At the entrance of the castle, on a wide long staircase, about 15 servants were waiting for them, lined up into 2 even, neat rows. Of course, they were not ordinary humans. They were short, frail-looking creatures similar to humans, but they had downturned ears, ashen hair, and dark red eyes. They were representatives of both female and male gender, and they all looked very young, almost like teenagers. Jack had also read about these creatures in his time, but now he could not remember their name. They were the ancestral companions of vampires from the clan of Black Swordsmen, the most powerful clan in Kmir. They took care of them from childhood and served them throughout their lives, never wanting anything more for themselves. Jack felt so bad that he could not even properly respond to their polite bow. He was getting worse every second. The unusual journey must have affected him like that, or maybe it was the crossing of an invisible barrier between Kmir and the territory of mortals. In the castle he felt even worse, and he lost all control over what was happening. He only noticed that someone was leading him somewhere along wide, bright corridors, through incredibly luxurious, spacious halls and galleries. There were so many galleries and rooms that at some point he doubted whether they would ever come to an end. Niadorshem was nearby. It seemed to Jack that he said with a slight smile, "You are an unusual person. Humans usually easily tolerate flights on Ihastras, and you're acting like a... Jack did not hear the continuation, as he concentrated at that moment on standing on his feet in a particularly strong attack of dizziness. Finally, he was led into a room, and Neandersham calmly explained without crossing the threshold. "Have a rest, young master. When you wake up, you will feel much better. Blow out one of the purple candles if you want to call for servants. Have a nice sleep." With that he left, closing the door soundlessly behind him. Jack immediately rushed to the bed. He did not even look at the room, although one fleeting glance was enough to understand that it had no resemblance to his former room. It was too big, ridiculously luxurious, and it had a huge, high four-poster bed. This room seemed even a little scary, perhaps because all the curtains were drawn. Though Jack noticed all this only briefly, and as soon as his tired head touched the pillow, whatever thoughts stopped bothering him at all.